I never believed in impossibilities until I worked for the Chun Financial Group in Singapore. For 15 years, I served as senior ledger analyst in their private archives, a position that required absolute discretion and an appreciation for the weight of old money. The Chuns had built their empire across 3 generations, each adding layers of complexity to investments that stretched from Malaysian palm oil to Argentine cattle ranches. The office occupied 2 floors of a colonial building on Raffles Place, its mahogany-panelled walls lined with ledgers dating back to 1928. My job was simple: maintain the historical records, ensure accuracy in quarterly reviews, and never question what I found. It was October 15th, 2010, when I first noticed the anomaly. While cross-referencing accounts for the 3rd quarter audit, I discovered a ledger I'd never seen before bound in midnight blue leather, its pages crisp despite the apparent age. The cover bore no date, only the Chun family crest embossed in fading gold. Inside, transactions were recorded in the precise handwriting I recognised from other Chun documents. But something felt wrong. The dates were future dates: November 23rd, 2010, December 8th, January 14th, 2011. Each entry detailed specific stock purchases, property acquisitions, and investment transfers that hadn't yet occurred. I assumed it was a planning document, perhaps projections or scheduled transactions. But the detail was to specific, exact stock prices, precise transaction times down to the minute, even the names of banks that would process the transfers. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled across something that shouldn't exist. The next morning, I arrived early to examine the ledger more carefully. The building felt different in the pre-dawn hours, quieter, as if holding its breath. I unlocked my office and went straight to where I'd left the blue ledger the previous evening. It wasn't there. I searched every shelf, every filing cabinet, every drawer where it could have been misplaced. Nothing. Yet I remembered clearly the weight of it in my hands, the cool texture of the leather cover, the impossible dates written in Chun family ink. By 8 o'clock, the office bustled with its usual activity. I asked my assistant, Mrs. Tan, if she'd seen any blue ledgers. Only the usual brown ones, Mr. Williams, she replied, her tone suggesting I might be working too hard. I returned to my desk, wondering if exhaustion had created false memories. But at 10:15, while organising quarterly reports, I found it again sitting precisely where I'd originally discovered it, as if it had never moved. This time, I photographed several pages with my phone before examining the content. The November 23rd entry caught my attention. A significant purchase of Straits Mining shares scheduled for 11:30 that morning, noting a price of $4.67 per share. Current market price was $5.12. I opened my computer and checked Straits Mining's real-time trading. At exactly 11:28, the stock began dropping rapidly. By 11:30, it had reached $4.67. Someone placed a massive buy order at that precise moment, the exact amount specified in the ledger. My hands trembled as I turned the page. For the remainder of that week, I monitored every transaction detailed in the blue ledger. Each prediction proved accurate to the cent and minute. December 8th arrived with Malaysian rubber futures spiking exactly as recorded. January 14th brought a property acquisition in downtown Singapore deal. I watched unfold through financial news reports with growing unease. The ledger didn't just predict market movements. It documented them with the precision of historical fact. Worse, many transactions involved the Chun family's holdings, suggesting someone within the organisation possessed impossible foreknowledge of market fluctuations. I began staying late, hoping to catch whoever was updating the ledger. The building's security system showed no unauthorised access to my office, yet new entries appeared regularly. Each prediction proved flawlessly accurate, creating a pattern that defied rational explanation. On January 28, 2011, I discovered an entry that made my blood freeze. The handwriting was different, shakier, more urgent. It recorded a transaction for March 15th, the complete liquidation of Chun family assets, totaling to $0.7 billion, to be transferred to numbered accounts in 3 different countries. Below that, in the same shaky handwriting, before the accident what accident, the original, precise handwriting resumed with subsequent entries, but that single line haunted me. I researched the Chun family history, looking for patterns, for accidents, for anything that might explain the ledger's existence. The colonial building's records showed it had housed Chun Financial since 1948. Before that, it was a private residence belonging to a British merchant family. In 1927, the entire merchant family died in what newspapers called a tragic gas leak accident. The date was March 15th. I couldn't ignore the connection any longer. March 15th held significance that transcended mere coincidence. The British merchant family's deaths in 1927. And now a predicted accident scheduled for the same date in 2000 and 1184 years apart. My research into the Chun family's acquisition of the building revealed disturbing details. They had purchased the property not through standard real estate channels, but through a private estate sale organised by the merchant family's sole surviving relative, a distant cousin, who had refused to live in the building. The purchase documents, stored in our oldest files, included an unusual clause. The Chun family agreed to maintain a memorial archive in the building's upper floors, preserving records related to the merchant family's business activities. This archive was never to be disturbed or relocated. I had never seen this memorial archive, despite 15 years in the building. That evening I explored the upper floors with a security pass borrowed from maintenance. The 3rd floor, supposedly used for storage, required a key I didn't possess. But the 4th floor was accessible, containing rooms I'd never entered. One room held filing cabinets filled with documents from the merchant family's trading business. Their handwriting was elegant, precise, identical to the writing in the blue ledger's predictive entries. As I examined their ledgers from 1926, I noticed they had recorded transactions for dates extending into 1927, including detailed business activities, scheduled for March 16th, 17th, and 18th. They had been planning a future they never lived to see. In the corner of the room sat a blue leather ledger, identical to the one that appeared in my office, but this one's pages were yellowed with age. The aged blue ledger contained the merchant family's records through March 14th, 1927. The final entry, dated March 14th at 11:45 p.m, was written in the same shaky handwriting I'd seen in the contemporary ledger. Gas valve will malfunction tomorrow at 7:17 Family meeting cancelled. Assets to be liquidated immediately. Below that, someone had added in different ink, warning ignored. History repeats itself for those who forget. I felt the temperature in the room drop noticeably. This wasn't just a coincidence or an elaborate hoax. Something in this building preserved memories, warnings, patterns that echoed across decades. The merchant family had somehow known their fate and tried to prevent it. Their failure had created an echo that now threatened the Chun family. I photographed every page of the historical ledger and returned to my office. The contemporary blue ledger was waiting, open to a new entry dated February 10th, today's date. In the precise handwriting, someone had recorded, "Archive discovered by L. Williams at 9:43 p.m. Warning will be delivered February 11th. My full name appeared nowhere in Chun Financial Group's employee records. I was listed simply as L. Williams, Yet somehow this impossible ledger knew exactly who I was and what I'd found. The entry continued, decision pending, preserve pattern or break cycle. Below that, in the familiar shaky handwriting, the debt must be paid. 3 generations of borrowed time end March 15th. Unless single quotes, the sentence remained incomplete, as if whoever was writing had been interrupted. Outside my office window, Singapore's financial district glittered with lights. Completely unaware of the impossible drama unfolding in one colonial building, I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I researched everything I could find about temporal anomalies, family curses and buildings that seemed to remember their histories. Most sources dismissed such phenomena as psychological projection, but a few academic papers discussed temporal echoes, locations where traumatic events created persistent imprints that could influence future occurrences. The Chun family building fit the profile perfectly. A sudden, unexpected death had occurred at a specific date, creating what researchers called a chronological anchor point. The trauma had imprinted itself so deeply that the location retained awareness of patterns leading to similar events. At dawn, I called in sick and spent the day investigating the Chun family's recent activities. Through financial news reports and public records, I discovered they had indeed been planning a major family meeting for March 15th. The purpose? Restructuring their business empire to prevent government seizure of assets linked to corruption investigations that were quietly building momentum. The parallels to 1927 were striking. The merchant family had faced similar pressure from British colonial authorities investigating tax evasion. Their meeting on March 15th had been intended to liquidate assets before legal action could freeze their accounts. Both families, separated by 84 years, had chosen the same date, the same strategy, even the same building for their emergency meetings. I realised the shaky handwriting belonged to someone who understood the pattern, perhaps the merchant family's descendant who had sold the building to the Chuns. Or someone else who had discovered the temporal connection. That person was trying to warn both families across time, but their warnings were consistently ignored or dismissed as impossible. By evening, I had made my decision. I needed to speak with someone in the Chun family directly, but approaching them required careful strategy. As a senior analyst, I had occasional contact with James Chun, the current patriarch's eldest son, who handled the family's institutional oversight. He was educated, rational, and might listen to evidence presented professionally. On February 12th, I requested a meeting under the pretext of quarterly irregularities requiring family attention. James agreed to see me that afternoon in his private officer room I'd only entered twice in 15 years. His office occupied a corner of the building's second floor, its windows overlooking Raffles Place. The walls displayed photographs of 3 generations of Chun family achievements, shipping contracts, property developments, banking partnerships. The family's rise from modest traders to financial powerhouse was documented in proud detail. I presented my findings carefully, beginning with market prediction accuracy and building toward the historical patterns. James listened with the patience of someone accustomed to complex financial explanations. But his expression grew increasingly sceptical as I described the Blue Ledger's impossible knowledge. "Mr. Williams, you're suggesting our building contains some form of supernatural accounting system that predicts market movements and family tragedies." His tone was professionally polite but clearly dismissive. I showed him the photographs of both ledgers, the historical one from 1927 and the contemporary one with its accurate predictions. "The market data is verifiable, sir. Every prediction has proved correct." James examined the photos with genuine curiosity. The accuracy of the financial predictions impressed him, but he remained convinced there was a rational explanation. "Perhaps someone in our organisation has access to insider information and is using these ledgers to document planned transactions," he suggested. "Sir, These transactions involve companies outside your family's direct control. I explained, showing him entries that had predicted competitor stock movements and international commodity prices. No insider information could account for this level of accuracy across such diverse markets. James studied the photographs more carefully. The precision of dates, times, and amounts was indeed remarkable. You're certain these entries were written before the events occurred? I nodded. I have time-stamped photographs showing entries for transactions that didn't occur until hours or days later. The pattern has been consistent for months. He was quiet for several minutes, scrolling through the images on my phone. Finally, he asked, "What about this reference to March 15th? You believe my family is somehow in danger?" The historical pattern suggests significant risk. Yes. Your family's meeting scheduled for that date parallels exactly the circumstances that led to the previous occupants' deaths. James's expression shifted from skepticism to concern. How do you know about our March meeting? Those details are strictly confidential. I explained about the Memorial Archive and the merchant family's similar situation in 1927. Both families faced government pressure, both planned asset liquidation meetings, both chose March 15th. The building seems to preserve these patterns. You're asking me to believe that our building remembers the past and is somehow warning us about the future. I'm asking you to consider postponing your family meeting to a different date. If I'm wrong, you've lost nothing. If I'm right, I let the implication hang between us. James was quiet for a long moment, weighing rational skepticism against unexplainable evidence. James agreed to investigate further before making any decisions about the March meeting. He gave me access to the building's complete historical records and authorized me to examine the Memorial Archive thoroughly. If there's something in this building that poses a threat to my family, I need to understand it fully over the next week. I immersed myself in documents dating back to the building's construction in 1897. The colonial architecture firm's blueprints showed something interesting. The fourth floor had originally been designed as a private residence's library, but modifications in 1926 had converted it into what the merchant family called their futures planning office. The merchant family had been early adopters of systematic market analysis, using mathematical models to predict trading patterns. Their success had been remarkable until their sudden deaths. The Chun family had achieved similar success using comparable analytical methods. Both families had unknowingly established their planning operations in the same physical space, creating what researchers might call a convergent temporal focus, a location where similar activities conducted across different time periods could influence each other. The Blue Ledger wasn't supernatural in a traditional sense. It was more like a recording device that preserved planning activities and projected them across time. The merchant family's intensive future planning in 1927 had created imprints that now manifested as predictive information for the Chun family's similar activities. I discovered something else in the Memorial Archive, a letter from the merchant family's surviving cousin, written when he sold the building to the Chuns in 1948. The letter explicitly warned about the dangers of conducting family planning meetings in the building on March 15th. The cousin's letter was addressed to the Chun patriarch who had purchased the building, but it had never been opened. The sealed envelope remained in the Memorial Archive files, marked to be read only in case of family emergency involving March activities. I photographed the letter and brought it to James. When we opened it together, the contents confirmed my worst fears about the temporal patterns. The letter read, "To the Chun family, this building carries a burden that killed my relatives. They planned their future to carefully in one specific room on one specific date. That planning created an echo that demands repetition. Every March 15th, the building expects the same pattern, family gathering, financial planning, emergency decisions. The building won't let the pattern change unless someone breaks it deliberately. My relatives tried to break it by cancelling their meeting, but the building made certain they couldn't escape their fate. If your family continues using this building for planning activities, you must never, under any circumstances, conduct family meetings on March 15th. The temporal echo will ensure your destruction just as it ensured theirs. This is not superstition. This is a warning based on documented evidence. James read the letter twice before speaking. This was written in 1948. Why didn't my grandfather heed this warning? I had researched that question. Your grandfather died in a car accident on March 14th, 1949, exactly 1 year after purchasing the building. Your family's emergency meeting to handle his estate was conducted on March 15th. The pattern had already begun repeating itself. The realization hit both of us simultaneously. The Chun family had been unconsciously repeating the deadly pattern for 3 generations. James immediately called an emergency family meeting for that evening. We need to examine our family's history with March 15th incidents, he said. If there's a pattern, we need to understand it completely before making any decisions. That night, the Chun family gathered in their conference room, ironically, the same room where they had planned to meet on March 15th. James explained my discoveries while I presented the evidence, photographs of both ledgers, the market prediction verification, the historical documents, and the cousin's warning letter. The family's reaction was mixed. The older generation, particularly James's father, David Chun, dismissed the evidence as coincidence and paranoia. Successful families always face crises in March, he argued. It's the end of the fiscal year. When government investigations intensify and market pressures peak, but James's younger sister, Linda Chun, supported by her teenage son Michael, found the evidence compelling. The market predictions alone prove something unusual is happening, Linda pointed out. We can't ignore accuracy rates that would be impossible through normal analysis, Michael, studying economics at university, was fascinated by the temporal echo theory. If planning activities in this building create predictive information, we're essentially benefiting from impossible market intelligence. But the cost seems to be a recurring threat every March 15th. David Chun remained sceptical but agreed to postpone the March meeting to March 20th as a precaution. 5 days won't significantly impact our planning, and it will put this nonsense to rest. I felt relieved. But something about the Blue Ledger's recent entries suggested the temporal echo wouldn't be satisfied by simple postponement. The next morning, I found a new entry in the Blue Ledger that confirmed my fears. Written in the shaky handwriting, March meeting postponed to March 20th. Pattern adaptation required. Original debt remains unpaid. Below that, in the precise handwriting, Michael Chun will return to building alone on March 15th to retrieve forgotten documents. Accident will occur at 7:17 a.m. Pattern preserved through next generation. My blood ran cold. The temporal echo had adapted to the postponement by targeting Michael instead of the full family meeting. Worse, the predicted scenario was specific enough to be believable. A university student returning to grab forgotten papers would face no security challenges. And an early morning accident in an empty building would appear completely accidental. I called James immediately. The pattern has changed. Your son is now in danger. When I explained the new prediction, James's voice became tense. Michael mentioned last night that he'd left some research materials in the conference room. He planned to retrieve them this weekend, on March 15th. He specifically said Saturday morning, early, before his economics seminar. March 15th fell on a Saturday in 2011. I met James at the building that afternoon to examine the conference room for potential hazards. The room appeared completely safe, modern ventilation, updated electrical systems, no gas connections. But the Memorial Archive had taught me that the building's dangers weren't always obvious. In the Merchant family's records, I found descriptions of their 1927 meeting preparations. The gas leak that killed them had been caused by a heating system malfunctioner system that had been recently serviced and declared perfectly safe. James and I spent hours examining every system in the conference room and surrounding areas. The building's maintenance records showed recent updates to electrical systems, air conditioning, and structural elements. Nothing indicated potential failure points that could threaten someone's safety. But the temporal echo operated through subtle manipulation of existing systems, not obvious supernatural manifestations. The Merchant family's gas leak had resulted from a tiny adjustment to a recently serviced valve adjustment so minor that investigators had ruled the deaths accidental. I studied the Blue Ledger's prediction more carefully. 7:17 a.m. was extremely specific timing. Something would happen at that exact moment to threaten Michael's life. We need to make sure Michael doesn't enter the building on March 15th, James decided. I'll tell him the building is closed for maintenance that weekend, but when James called his son that evening, Michael had already made arrangements with building security to access the conference room early Saturday morning. The security guard, Mr. Lim, had agreed to let Michael in specifically at 7 o'clock to retrieve his materials before his seminar. I can cancel the security arrangement, James said after hanging up. That might not be enough, I warned. The temporal echo seems to ensure that events occur as predicted. If Michael is determined to retrieve his materials, he might find another way into the building. We needed a more comprehensive solution. I suggested James retrieve the materials himself on Friday evening, eliminating Michael's need to visit the building. But when we went to the conference room, Michael's documents weren't there. He must have misremembered where he left them, James concluded. We searched the entire building Friday evening but found no trace of Michael's research materials. James called his son again to ask specifically where he'd left the documents. They're definitely in the conference room, Michael insisted. I left them on the side table near the window. Blue folder with my economics seminar notes and the comparative analysis charts. James and I had searched that exact location multiple times. Michael, there's no blue folder in that room. That's impossible. Dad, I put it there yesterday after our family meeting. A disturbing possibility occurred to me. I asked James to have Michael describe the documents in detail. Michael's description was specific. 15 pages of handwritten notes comparing Asian market patterns from 1927 to 2011, with particular focus on timing patterns related to family business decisions. He'd been working on a university paper about how successful trading families repeatedly made similar decisions across generations. James, I said quietly, your son has been researching the exact same temporal patterns we discovered. His documents are probably connected to the building's echo effects. You think the building is using Michael's research as part of the pattern? I nodded grimly. The Merchant family died because they were planning their business future too precisely. Your family has been unknowingly repeating similar planning activities. Now Michael is researching how families repeat these patterns across time. He's become part of the temporal echo himself. The blue folder probably existed only when Michael was in the building, manifesting as part of the echo's influence on his academic work. We need to keep him away from this building entirely, James decided. Saturday morning, March 15th, I arrived at the building at 6:30 a.m. to ensure Michael couldn't enter. James had arranged for building security to deny access to everyone except essential personnel. but I wanted to be present in case Michael attempted to enter anyway. Mr. Lim. The security guard confirmed that Michael had called earlier to cancel his 7 o'clock appointment. Young Mr. Chun said he found his materials at home, Lim reported. No need to enter the building today. I felt tremendous relief, but decided to remain in my office until after 7:17 a.m. to observe whether anything unusual occurred at the predicted time. At exactly 7:17, I heard a sound from the conference room papers rustling, as if someone was searching through documents. But, according to security, no one else was in the building. I investigated immediately. The conference room was empty, but on the side table near the window lay a blue folder that hadn't been there the previous evening. It contained 15 pages of handwritten notes in Michael's distinctive handwriting, comparing Asian market patterns from 1927 to 2011. The temporal echo had manifested Michael's research materials exactly as predicted, even though Michael himself hadn't entered the building. The pattern was completing itself regardless of our preventive measures. I photographed the documents and called James. Your son's research appeared in the conference room at the predicted time. The temporal echo created the situation it predicted even without Michael's physical presence. How is that possible? The building preserves planning activities. Michael's research about family patterns has become part of the echo's historical record. James arrived within 30 minutes, accompanied by Michael, who was bewildered by his father's urgent phone call. When Michael saw his research folder on the conference table, his confusion deepened. That's impossible, he said. I have my folder at home. I was working on those notes last night. Show me, James requested. Michael opened his backpack and produced an identical blue folder containing identical research notes. We now had 2 copies of the same research one that Michael had created at home, and one that the building had manifested as part of the temporal echo. This doesn't make sense, Michael said, comparing the 2 Folgepapiere. They're exactly the same. But I know I only created one set of these notes. I explained my theory. Your research about repetitive family patterns has become part of this building's temporal preservation system. By studying how families repeat similar decisions across generations, you've documented the exact phenomenon that's been affecting your own family. Michael examined the building manifested folder more carefully. The handwriting is mine, but some of the analysis goes deeper than what I actually wrote. It includes conclusions I was planning to develop but hadn't yet written down. The temporal echo wasn't just preserving existing planning activities. It was extrapolating unfinished plans and manifesting them as completed documents. Michael's research had become prophetic, predicting his own family's patterns with unsettling accuracy. According to this analysis, Michael continued, reading from the manifested folder, our family should experience a crisis point today, followed by a fundamental change in our relationship with this building, as Michael read from his temporally manifested research. The analysis became increasingly specific about the Chun family situation. The notes described a pattern where families became temporally entangled with buildings that preserved their planning activities, eventually reaching a resolution crisis that determined whether the family would break free from the cycle or be destroyed by it. According to this, Michael said the merchant family tried to break their cycle by cancelling their March 15th meeting, but they failed because they didn't understand the temporal mechanism. The building had already incorporated their planning energy and required completion of the pattern. James read over his son's shoulder. What does it suggest we should do? Michael's expression grew troubled. The research indicates that breaking the cycle requires conscious collaboration with the temporal echo rather than resistance against it. We need to complete the pattern deliberately and then redirect the building's preservation energy toward different activities. I understood the implication. Your family needs to conduct your meeting as originally planned, but change the nature of what you're planning. Exactly, Michael confirmed. Instead of planning asset liquidation to avoid government investigation, we need to plan asset restructuring to cooperate with government requirements. The temporal difference should break the destructive cycle. The Blue Ledger's latest entry supported this theory. In the precise handwriting, pattern modification accepted. March 15th meeting will proceed with cooperative rather than defensive strategy. Below that. In the shaky handwriting, debt begins to be repaid. Future planning continues with positive rather than fearful motivation. James looked at both his son and me. You're asking me to risk my family's fortune on a theory about temporal echoes, Dad. Michael said gently, we're not risking anything. The government investigation is real, regardless of temporal patterns. Cooperative compliance with the investigation is actually the safest financial strategy for our family's long-term stability. James considered this perspective. As a businessman, he understood that defensive asset liquidation often created more legal problems than it solved, while transparent cooperation frequently led to reduced penalties and preserved business relationships. The temporal echo has been pushing our family toward defensive patterns that historically failed, I added. But Michael's research suggests we can use the same temporal energy to establish positive patterns that ensure long-term success. Michael opened the Building Manifested folder to a page he hadn't yet read. This analysis projects the outcomes of both approaches. Defensive liquidation leads to family asset dispersal and loss of business continuity. Cooperative restructuring leads to controlled growth and government. Partnership opportunities. The prediction was remarkably specific, including potential government contracts and international partnership opportunities that would emerge from transparent compliance with the investigation. James spent several minutes studying his son's temporally enhanced research. The analysis demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both government regulatory patterns and international business development insights beyond Michael's current academic level, but consistent with his intellectual capacity. This building has been preserving planning intelligence for over 80 years, James realized. Instead of fighting against it, we should learn to work with it. He made his decision. We'll conduct our family meeting as scheduled this afternoon, but we'll plan cooperation rather than evasion. The Blue Ledger's final entry appeared as he spoke. Pattern successfully modified. Temporal debt resolved. Future planning continues with gratitude rather than fear. The Chun family meeting that afternoon was unlike any in their 3-generation history. Instead of emergency asset protection, they planned a comprehensive cooperation strategy with government investigators. Instead of defensive secrecy, they chose transparent communication about their business activities. Michael's temporally enhanced research provided detailed guidance for restructuring their holdings to comply with evolving international financial regulations. The analysis identified opportunities for growth through legitimate government partnerships and ethical international investments. By evening, the family had developed a strategy that preserved their wealth while positioning them as industry leaders in transparent financial practices. The government investigation, which they had feared as a threat, became an opportunity to demonstrate corporate responsibility. I observed the transformation from my office, monitoring the Blue Ledger throughout the day. New entries appeared, but the handwriting was different, more confident. Instead of fearful predictions, the ledger began documenting positive projections. Successful government partnerships, expanding international business, and sustainable family prosperity. The temporal echo had evolved from preserving patterns of fear and defensive planning to preserving patterns of confidence and cooperative planning. Set evening James asked me to join the family in the conference room. Mr. Williams, your investigation saved our family from repeating a destructive historical pattern. We owe you our gratitude, Michael added. Your discovery helped us understand that this building isn't cursed, it's gifted. It preserves planning intelligence and makes it available to future users. We've been benefiting from accumulated business wisdom without realizing it. The building had always been trying to help families plan successfully. Previous occupants had simply approached the temporal preservation system with fear rather than gratitude. In the weeks following the March 15th meeting, the Chun family's cooperative approach with government investigators yielded remarkable results. The investigation discovered minor compliance issues that were easily corrected, and the family's transparent cooperation impressed regulatory officials enough to offer them partnership opportunities in government-sponsored international development projects. The Blue Ledger continued documenting these positive developments with the same precision it had previously used for market predictions. But now the predictions focused on cooperation opportunities, partnership potentials, and sustainable growth strategies. I began studying the ledger's new patterns with scientific curiosity rather than fearful apprehension. The temporal preservation system appeared to function like an advanced planning intelligence that learned from accumulated business experience and projected optimal strategies for current situations. Michael, fascinated by the temporal mechanics, changed his university focus to temporal business analysis, a field he essentially created by combining economics, psychology, and theoretical physics. His research attracted international attention from academics studying similar phenomena in historically significant commercial buildings. The Chun family decided to establish a research foundation dedicated to understanding temporal preservation systems in commercial architecture. They invited scholars from around the world to study their buildings' unique properties, transforming their private business concern into a valuable scientific resource. James asked me to serve as the Foundation's research coordinator, documenting how temporal echoes could be beneficial rather than destructive. When approached with proper understanding and respectful cooperation, the Memorial Archive was expanded to include contemporary research alongside historical merchant family documents, creating a comprehensive record of how temporal preservation systems evolved over time. By the end of 2011, the Chun Financial Group had become the most transparent and successful family business in Singapore's financial district. Their cooperation with government regulators set new industry standards for ethical international trading, and their Temporal Research Foundation attracted partnerships with universities worldwide. The Blue Ledger's entries now read like optimistic business projections, documenting opportunities for ethical growth and international cooperation. The predictions remained remarkably accurate, but they focused on positive outcomes rather than crisis management. I found myself serving as a bridge between the building's temporal intelligence and contemporary business applications. My role evolved from ledger analyst to temporal research coordinator, helping other families and businesses understand how to work with rather than against historical planning patterns. Michael completed his university degree and returned to work with the Foundation full-time, developing theoretical frameworks for temporal business intelligence. His research papers described how accumulated planning activities in historically significant buildings could provide valuable guidance for contemporary decision-making. Other families with similar temporal experiences began contacting the Foundation for guidance. We discovered that many old commercial buildings in Singapore's financial district exhibited comparable preservation effects, creating a network of temporal planning resources throughout the city. The merchant family's descendant, now in his 80s, visited the Foundation after reading about our research. He expressed relief that the building's temporal gifts were finally being appreciated rather than feared. "My relatives would be pleased," he said, examining the current Blue Ledger's positive projections. They always hoped their planning work would benefit future business families. The temporal debt had indeed been transformed into temporal gratitude. The merchant family descendant, Thomas Morrison, became essential collaborator in our research. He possessed family documents and photographs that revealed crucial details about the temporal preservation system's origins. According to Morrison family records, the merchant family had been early pioneers in systematic business planning, using mathematical models and detailed projection techniques that were revolutionary for the 1920s. Their intensive planning activities had created what modern researchers might call a temporal data repository within the building's structure. They weren't just planning their own business activities, Thomas explained. They were developing planning methodologies they hoped would benefit future commercial occupants of the building. The gas leak accident that killed his relatives hadn't destroyed their planning work, it had preserved it in temporal form. Their death had created an anchor point that allowed their planning intelligence to persist and influence future business activities. Michael's research confirmed this theory through architectural analysis. The building's colonial design included several features that inadvertently enhanced temporal preservation. Specific room proportions, materials with crystalline structures, and architectural geometries that focused planning energy. We began mapping temporal preservation sites throughout Singapore, identifying other buildings where intensive planning activities had created similar effects. The research revealed a hidden network of business intelligence preserved in the city's colonial architecture. The Chun Foundation published its findings in international journals, establishing Singapore as the world's leading research centre for temporal business intelligence. The city government recognised the economic potential and designated several buildings as temporal planning heritage sites. Our work had transformed supernatural fear into scientific opportunity, benefiting Singapore's entire financial community. By 2012, temporal business intelligence had become a recognised field of study, with Singapore's colonial financial district serving as the primary research laboratory. The Chun Foundation's discoveries attracted investment from international technology companies interested in developing commercial applications for temporal planning systems. The Blue Ledger continued documenting the Chun family's business activities, but its scope had expanded to include foundation research and international partnerships. The predictions now covered educational opportunities, research developments, and global cooperation initiatives. I often reflected on how dramatically our understanding of the building had evolved. What had initially appeared to be a supernatural threat had revealed itself as an invaluable business resource repository of accumulated planning intelligence that could guide contemporary decision-making. The temporal preservation system taught us that intensive planning activities create persistent information patterns that can benefit future users. Fear and defensive thinking amplified destructive cycles, while gratitude and cooperative thinking amplified constructive cycles. Michael, now 23, had become an international expert on temporal business analysis, consulting with families and corporations worldwide who experienced similar phenomena. His theoretical frameworks helped transform temporal anomalies from sources of fear into sources of competitive advantage. James continued leading the Chun Financial Group, but their business model had evolved to incorporate temporal intelligence as a core planning resource. They achieved sustainable growth rates that exceeded industry standards while maintaining exemplary ethical standards. The building's temporal preservation system had fulfilled its original purpose, preserving planning intelligence to benefit future business activities. The merchant family's death had been tragic, but their planning work lived on, helping countless subsequent families achieve sustainable prosperity. Today, more than a decade later, I serve as Director of Temporal Business Research for the Chun Foundation. Our building houses one of the world's most sophisticated temporal intelligence laboratories, where researchers from 6 continents study how accumulated planning activities influence contemporary business decisions. The Blue Ledger remains active, documenting ongoing research activities and projecting optimal strategies for advancing temporal intelligence applications. Its predictions continue proving accurate, but they now focus on scientific breakthroughs and international cooperation opportunities. Michael Chen, now Dr. Chun, directs temporal research programs at universities worldwide. His doctoral dissertation on temporal planning intelligence in commercial architecture established theoretical foundations for a field that combines archaeology, economics, and consciousness studies. The Chun family's business empire continues thriving through ethical practices and temporal intelligence applications. Their cooperation with government regulators has evolved into partnerships that influence international financial policy, always guided by the accumulated wisdom preserved in their building. I often stand in the conference room where our transformation began, grateful for the impossible journey that led us from fear to understanding. The building no longer feels haunted, it feels purposeful, alive with the accumulated intelligence of generations of business planners. The Memorial Archive now preserves both historical and contemporary planning activities, creating a comprehensive repository of business wisdom spanning nearly a century. Future occupants will inherit not just the merchant family's planning intelligence, but our generation's contributions to temporal business science. Sometimes I wonder what impossible discoveries await the next researcher who notices something that shouldn't exist. In this building, impossibilities have a way of becoming tomorrow's innovations. The temporal debt has become temporal gift,